Welcome to Martin Monday's Intentional Intimacy, where love, life, and legacy meet in the moments that matter most. Every week, I will share sacred reflections of my 30-year marriage before Martin's passing, as well as our life now without him. May these reflections help us live with more weight, warmth, and wisdom. Martin was a letter carrier by profession, but a life carrier by purpose. So let's take a moment and let intentional intimacy speak. Hello, everyone. This is Paula. Welcome to episode 20 of Martin Monday's Intentional Intimacy, where today I am going to talk about people are your greatest asset. Yep, people are your greatest asset. So I'm going to tell a story about my job. I won't call the name of the said employer. Protect the names, or don't say the names to protect the innocent, right? And so I was working at a particular employer. I had just graduated from grad school. And this was, I think, my second job after grad school, because the first job that I got right out of grad school, I was only there for about 3 months and they went through a reorg and I was laid off. So, but here I am now in my first, real longer term employment. And I loved what I was doing. I loved the job that I was performing. It had been a new role. And so it was an opportunity for me to really create and to just make the role my own. It wasn't like I was stepping into anyone else's shoes. I could formulate it and do whatever I wanted, in the job. And my boss gave me a lot of leeway because he's like, Paula, I'm, really relying on you, to make this thing be what it needs to be. And so I really liked the job. It was challenging, but yet it was very exciting. And so I was doing well in it. And we were growing. The department and what we were doing was expanding and things were going really well. And so we got to the point where my boss was like, we need to hire someone else to do what you do, so we need, standard operating procedures. We need things, to document and understand like how you do things, because so much is in your head. And I'm like, you're right. We got to get it out of my head, And so he's like, we need to hire someone. I said, well, these are types of people that I think would be great, And so I told him like what type of skill set I thought would be great for the role and everything. And so he took my input. And then he mentioned to me that there was a person in-house that he thought would be a good candidate to come and work with us. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And he mentioned her name to me, and I knew her in passing, but I can't really say I knew her very well. But I did know that she was in our finance department, so she was going to bring a really strong financial aspect to the job, which was necessary. But I also kind of knew that, her role in what she was currently doing was, perhaps a grade or so above my current role. And so, the first thing I thought about was, okay, that's great. She can come on in here, but, she doesn't know this. She may know all that she knows, but she doesn't know this. So how is that going to be compensation wise? Because I don't want to lose money. I'm doing well. And obviously I'm making the company money and everything. And I'm actually going to have to train somebody. I want to make sure that our compensation is comparable. And so I asked him that specific question, actually on more than one occasion. But I know I at least asked him on this one occasion when he and I were talking, and he was just like, no, Paula, you guys are comparable, in your compensation. He was like, you guys both have your advanced degrees and, this and that. And he's like, no, he's like, trust me, you're comparable. He's like, trust me. So I said, okay. And I did ask him again, and he told me kind of the same thing. So I'm like, okay, fine. So she came on board. I trained her. If I could cut out sections of my brain, that's one thing about me. I don't mind, sharing information. I'm not one that's an information hoarder or anything like that, because at the end of the day, nobody can be me and I can't be anyone else. So we could have the same level of information, and how we process it and how we manage it is completely different. So I don't have a problem with sharing of information. So I trained this young lady and gave her all the information and stuff she needed. Couple months in, and I know it was only God for me to find this out. And I don't have to say the details per se of how I found it out. But I found out that the compensation between me and this young lady that I had trained was approximately about $11,000 to her favor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here it is. I've trained this person. She didn't have a clue in the world as to what this stuff was. Yes, she had great skills. Don't get me wrong. Highly intelligent woman, but she didn't know what I knew, and I had to train her on how to do it. And for her to be making $11,000 more, that set me on fire. Like, no, that set me on fire. And I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday. And as soon as I found out, I called my husband and I said, babe, da 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 da. And I just went, and she da 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 da. And I just went on and on and on and on. And I was like, I'm leaving. I'm quitting my job. I'm not going to stay here. I can't trust these people and they don't deserve me. And I just went on and on and on and on. And when I finished, I kind of got the silence on the other side. And I was just like, you don't have anything to say? And he was just like, I was just waiting for you to finish, babe. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, what? What do you say? And he was just like, I support you. If you want to quit your job, go ahead and quit your job. He's like, I will support you. I was like, really, babe? I said, I'm quitting today. And he was just like, babe, he said, if you really feel that strongly that you need to quit your job and you're going to quit today, he's like, trust me, we've been in worse situations. We will make it work. And I support you. Him saying that was everything to me, y'all. A little crazy, when I look back on it. But the fact that he believed in me and supported me was like, babe, why don't you tell me, no, babe, you crazy. You need to stay at your job. We got bills to pay. We got that. No, he was like, do whatever you need to do. I support you. And so I said, okay. I said, well, I'll keep you posted. I need to make some phone calls. And so I got off the phone and I called a friend of mine and I wanted to tell my friend what had happened. And I said, can you believe and whatever? And he was just like, well, why don't you come work for my company? And I was like, what? I said, you're in tech. I said, I'm not a tech, person. He's like, Paula, you know systems more than what you realize. He said, why don't you come and work for my company? He said, send me your resume. So I was like, okay. So I shot him over my resume and he said, he's like, okay, so can you meet with my boss tomorrow? I was like, tomorrow? He's like, yeah, my boss looked at your resume and said he wanted to meet with you. And I was like, that fast? And he's just like, well, yeah. He said, plus I told him that he needs to hire you. I was like, are you serious? And he was just like, yeah. So I was like, okay. I said, I can meet with him on tomorrow. He was like, okay. And so sure enough, I resigned from my job that afternoon. My boss asked me why. I told him why. And I told him specifically that I could not trust him because I felt that he had lied to me. When I asked him on more than one occasion if there was an income disparity between me and the other person, and he said no. And I couldn't stay at a company and organization like that. And it was a small company because the CEO reached out to me and, pulled me into his office with cookies and all this kind of stuff and trying to get me to stay. I said, I can't stay. The level of integrity here is not what I would want to be around. And I would rather rough it and try to figure it out than to subject myself to an environment that does not support me. And so, no, I quit. And so I put my notice in. That Friday, I met with my friend's boss, and he hired me right on the spot. And so within 24 hours, he offered me a position, and he offered me far more than what I was making at my current job. So I made up for that $11,000 that was short, plus a nice little amount as well. And sure enough, it was a consulting company. I started working for them, and our primary client was Independence Blue Cross. And so I was on site at Independence Blue Cross working with this consulting company. And I was with the consulting company for about maybe a year and a half. And then the contract that the consulting company had was kind of coming to play. But at that point, I had already made an indelible mark there within Independence Blue Cross. And so when the company was leaving, the consulting company was leaving, someone at Independence Blue Cross asked me to stay on. And so then I got hired. And I've been at Independence Blue Cross now for 30 years. So I don't know what would have happened had I stayed, or like, I don't know. But in any case, I want to reflect about people being your greatest asset in on the opposite side. Okay, I'll try to make this brief because I didn't realize my story got long, guys. Sorry. But in believing that people are your greatest asset, when we think about this story, Martin's belief in me gave me confidence, knowing that I would find something else. I didn't know what would come. I mean, I'm quitting my job, like I'm out of here. As crazy as that sounded, I'm out of here. But he believed in me and he supported me in the process. I didn't know what that would look like, if it would be days, weeks, months, however long it would be. And we had already been through some financial difficulties with him being injured on his job and so forth. But none of that mattered to him because his belief and his confidence in me is what mattered most. And that was significant. But the other part in this is the belief and that my former coworker, and my friend that I called had in me. Like he was just like, oh, yep, send me your resume, boom. Like it all catapulted. And so people, human capital, they're your greatest assets. Yes, income is great. Jobs are great. Homes are great. Cars are great. All that kind of stuff. But there's nothing like human capital. People are your greatest asset. So how are you managing your people human capital assets? Are you making good deposits? Are you making wise withdrawals? Let's reflect on that this week. Look at those that are depositing into you, as well as those that are making withdrawals from you. Also, look at those for whom you are depositing into, and how are you withdrawing from them? People are your greatest asset. I got something yesterday from my mentor. It was like a relationship audit. And it's like this tool that you go through to try to understand the various relationships that are in your life. And it is important to understand where you're being drained or where you're being fueled, and where you're, being lifted, and encouraged. And so I strongly encourage you to do that. Look this week at your relationships, look at your human capital, look at yourself as a resource, and look at those resources that are available to you, and be honest and open about it. Be real transparent and assess it, because at the end of the day, your greatest asset is people, the ones that believe in you and the ones that you choose to believe in as well. So hopefully something I said has shifted your energy, awakened your potential, and I will catch you next week on Martin Mondays. Have a great week. Martin Mondays continues on Tuesday with the Tuesday tea. Check it out and join me and take a sip. Martin used to say a lot of things. Some were funny, some were wise, but one thing he often said was, wow. Wow. Just those 3 letters. It spoke volumes. It meant a lot. When he didn't know what to say, wow. When he was excited about something, wow. When he was confused, perhaps, or even frustrated, he said, wow. And he's still saying wow. Through this bracelet, he's still saying wow, because he's still saying, may your whole life prove that God is good. And so in closing, that's my hope for you this week. May you have wow moments as you too are living out legacy. Live in the wow. Live in the reality of knowing that your whole life is good. Live in the heartbeat of Martin Mondays and intentional intimacy. May that anchor you in this week as you build legacy, one wow, one moment at a time. See you next week.